The day everything changed. The hospital smelled of quiet fear and endless waiting. Soft beeps from distant machines filled the air, and the light from the corridor slipped through the half-closed blinds like a pale memory. Keanu sat on the wooden chair outside room 17, his fingers pressed together, his eyes fixed on the floor tiles. He had been there for hours, motionless, like a shadow that refused to leave. No one who saw him could have imagined the storm inside his calm face. It all began 2 days ago. Sandra had called him early in the morning, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to sound cheerful. She said she had been feeling dizzy and weak, but it was nothing serious. Keanu had offered to drive her to the hospital, but she laughed it off, saying she only needed rest. Later that evening, when he didn't hear from her, a strange heaviness filled his chest. He sent her a message, then another, but there was no reply. The silence between them stretched until it became unbearable. Then came the call. It was short, sharp, and cold. Sandra had collapsed at home and was taken to St. Vincent's Hospital. The nurse on the phone didn't say much, only that she was stable but under observation. Keanu remembered how the phone slipped from his hand for a second, how the sound of his own heartbeat drowned everything around him. He left immediately, not caring about the cameras outside, the people who always tried to capture his calm image. This time, none of that mattered. When he reached the hospital, he saw Sandra through the glass window of the emergency ward. Her skin looked pale, her lips dry, her eyes half closed as if she was drifting between dreams and pain. Wires and tubes surrounded her fragile frame. Keanu's throat tightened. This was not the strong, radiant woman he knew. This was someone caught between the light and the shadows. He wanted to rush inside, to hold her hand, to say something that could break the distance between them. But the nurse stopped him gently, asking him to wait outside until the doctor came out. Those minutes turned into hours. He sat quietly, remembering the first time they had met on a film set decades ago. She had been shy yet fearless, full of laughter that could fill an entire room. She once told him that life was about giving more than taking, about staying kind even when the world wasn't. Now, watching her lying there, he wondered how someone so full of life could suddenly fall so silent. The doctor finally came out, holding a file in one hand and fatigue in his eyes. He said Sandra had suffered a sudden collapse due to extreme exhaustion and an underlying condition that had gone unnoticed. Her heart had struggled for a few minutes before they stabilized her. The doctor's words were calm but heavy. He said she would need close monitoring for the next few days, and they were still running tests. Keanu nodded, but his mind drifted. He felt an ache in his chest, not of panic, but of deep sorrow mixed with helplessness. He had always believed in staying strong, in facing life quietly, but now, for the first time in years, he felt fragile. He leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes, hearing only the faint rhythm of machines and the soft footsteps of nurses passing by. As night fell, the hallway emptied, but Keanu stayed. A nurse offered him tea, but he refused with a small smile. He wanted to be there in case she woke up, in case she asked for someone. The moonlight entered through the long window, resting softly on his face. He thought about all the moments they never spoke about, the letters never sent, the feelings never shared, the distance they both pretended was necessary. Life had a strange way of reminding people what truly mattered, often too late. Around midnight, a faint sound came from inside the room. He stood up instantly. Through the glass, he saw Sandra moving slightly, her hand trembling. He went closer, pressing his palm against the glass as if trying to reach her through it. Her eyes opened slowly, scanning the room in confusion before finding him. For a second, neither moved. She tried to smile, but her lips barely shifted. He whispered softly, though she couldn't hear. "I'm here." A nurse entered to check her vitals, and Sandra's eyes closed again, exhausted. Keanu stayed there, his heart steady but heavy. The nurse later came out and told him she was stable but needed rest. He nodded again, though his eyes stayed fixed on the door. By dawn, he was still sitting there, watching the sky outside turn from gray to gold. He hadn't slept, but he didn't feel tired. He felt connected into something fragile and real. He realized how unpredictable life was, how quickly moments could turn into memories. As he stood up to stretch, a quiet voice came from behind. It was the doctor again, holding another file, this time with a more serious look. He asked Keanu to come to his office for a private discussion. Keanu followed, his heart sinking with each step. Inside, the doctor closed the door gently and sat down. He took a deep breath before speaking. He said there was something in Sandra's blood tests that needed immediate attention, something they hadn't expected. He didn't use dramatic words, but his tone carried weight. He said they would need to start a more detailed treatment soon, but first, they had to tell Sandra, and she might not take it well. Keanu froze. He asked what exactly it was, but the doctor hesitated, saying they would confirm everything in a few hours. As Keanu walked back to the hallway, he felt as if the ground beneath him had shifted. He looked at the room again, at Sandra resting peacefully, unaware of what might be coming. His heart whispered that this was only the beginning of something far deeper than either of them could have imagined. And for the first time, Keanu realized that what he felt for her went beyond friendship or shared memories. It was something that could no longer be hidden, especially now, when time itself seemed uncertain. But before he could say anything, before the sun had even fully risen, a sudden alarm rang from the monitor inside Sandra's room. The nurse rushed in. The steady beeping turned erratic. Keanu's breath caught as he ran forward, his heart pounding. The door closed before him. Voices shouted inside. Something had gone wrong, and this time, he didn't know if love alone would be enough to bring her back. The longest minute of his life. The sound of the monitor filled the hallway like thunder inside silence. The sharp, broken rhythm of beeps tore through Keanu's chest. He stood frozen for a moment, watching through the glass as nurses rushed around Sandra's bed. One of them shouted for the doctor and another called for a crash cart. Keanu's hands trembled slightly, his throat dry, his heart beating in a rhythm that no longer felt his own. He wanted to go in, to push the door open, to be near her, but the nurse at the door raised a hand, telling him to stay back. Keanu stepped closer anyway, his voice breaking, saying her name softly, again and again. "Sandra, Sandra." The sound barely reached past the glass, yet in his heart, it echoed like a desperate prayer. Inside, they were performing chest compressions. The doctor barked calm but urgent instructions. The monitor line jumped, then flattened again, then jumped once more. Keanu's knees almost gave out. He leaned against the wall, his palm pressed against the cold surface, trying to steady his breathing. The nurse outside placed a hand on his arm, whispering that they were doing their best. But in that moment, those words meant nothing. Nothing could fill the fear spreading through him like fire. After what felt like eternity but was only a few minutes, the sound of the monitor changed again. The rhythm returned, faint but steady. The doctor looked up and gave a small nod. One nurse sighed with relief. Keanu pressed his forehead to the glass, his eyes wet but quiet. She was back. She was still there. A few moments later, the doctor stepped out, his face calm but serious. "She's stable now," he said softly. Her heart stopped briefly, but we revived her. "She needs rest and constant monitoring." Keanu nodded, unable to speak. His voice was trapped somewhere deep inside, buried under fear and gratitude. The doctor added that they needed to run more tests soon to understand why her condition had worsened so suddenly. He mentioned words like infection, fatigue, and stress, but Keanu only heard the sound of Sandra's name in his head. He thanked the doctor quietly and sat back down on the same chair as before. Hours passed slowly. The early morning light spilled across the white tiles, painting soft shadows on the floor. Keanu hadn't moved. He just watched the door, waiting for any sign of movement. A nurse came and offered him water. He took it this time, nodding gratefully. His hands shook slightly as he held the cup. In his mind, flashes of old memories played like a film. He remembered her laughter during a break on set, the way she teased him for being too quiet. He remembered how she once said that silence could say more than words if it came from the right heart. Now he wondered if she ever knew how much her silence meant to him, how much of his peace came from just knowing she existed. Around noon, a soft knock came from behind him. He turned and saw Sandra's assistant, Emma, standing there with red eyes. She looked frightened and tired, holding a small bag. She said she had brought some of Sandra's things, her phone, her favorite sweater, a small notebook she always carried. Keanu took the bag from her gently and thanked her. Emma looked at him, her lips trembling, and asked how she was doing. Keanu spoke softly. "She's fighting. She always does." Emma nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She said Sandra had been overworking herself for weeks, trying to finish several projects while also helping a friend's charity. "She never stopped," Emma whispered. "She kept saying people needed her, that rest could wait." Keanu listened, his chest tightening. He knew that part of Sandra too well, the part that gave everything to everyone else, leaving nothing for herself. When Emma left, Keanu opened the small notebook. Inside were scribbled lines, thoughts, fragments, maybe pieces of something she was writing. One page caught his eye. In her neat, slanted handwriting, she had written, "The strongest people are those who hide their pain behind kind eyes." He closed the notebook slowly, holding it against his chest. As afternoon turned to evening, the doctor returned. His expression was careful, the kind doctors wear when they carry heavy news. He asked Keanu to step aside again. In a low voice, he explained that Sandra's collapse might be linked to a condition affecting her immune system. They needed to run more tests to confirm, but if it was what they suspected, it would require long-term treatment. Keanu listened quietly, every word sinking deep. The doctor emphasized that she was stable for now, but her body was fragile. She would need emotional support as much as medical care. He looked at Keanu directly and said, "She trusts you. She'll need you close." Those words felt like both a responsibility and a blessing. Keanu nodded again, but inside he was fighting a storm. He had spent years keeping distance from people he cared about, afraid of losing them. Now that distance felt meaningless. What mattered was staying, even if it hurt. When night came, the nurse finally allowed him to enter her room. The soft sound of the monitor was steady again. The lights were dim and the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and hope. He walked slowly to her bedside, pulling the chair close. Sandra's eyes were still closed, her breathing shallow but even. He reached out and gently held her hand, surprised at how cold it felt. "You scared everyone," he whispered softly, his voice shaking. "You scared me." His thumb brushed against her hand as if to remind her he was real, that he wasn't leaving. He sat there for hours, saying nothing, just being there. Every few minutes, he looked at her face, searching for a sign of movement, a twitch, anything. Sometimes he would talk softly, not about the hospital, not about pain, but about small things. He told her about the sunrise he had watched from the parking lot, about the sound of birds that came before dawn. He knew she couldn't hear him, but speaking kept the silence from swallowing him whole. Somewhere around midnight, as he was resting his head on the edge of her bed, he felt a faint pressure against his fingers. He looked up instantly. Sandra's hand had moved slightly. Her eyelids fluttered. Keanu leaned closer, calling her name softly. Her lips parted, and in a weak whisper she said, "You stayed." He smiled through tears. "Of course I did," he said quietly. She tried to speak again, but her voice faded. He told her not to force herself. "Just rest," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She smiled faintly before drifting back to sleep. As he sat there, holding her hand, Keanu realized something deeper than fear. He realized that moments like this, raw, quiet, imperfect, were what made life meaningful. Not fame, not applause, not the world's noise. Just two people in a silent room, holding on to each other when everything else felt uncertain. But outside the room, life didn't pause. The doctor reviewed her latest scans and noticed something troubling. There was a reading he didn't like, something that hadn't been there before. He made a note to run another test in the morning, but his expression darkened slightly. Inside, Keanu closed his eyes for the first time in 2 days. He didn't know that the next morning would bring a revelation that would shake him completely. Something from Sandra's medical file, something she had kept hidden even from those closest to her. And when he found out, the calm that always defined him would be tested like never before. The secret she never told. The morning light entered the room quietly, resting across the pale sheets. The hospital had its own rhythm. Footsteps in the hallway, distant beeps, whispers of nurses exchanging reports. Keanu opened his eyes slowly, realizing he had fallen asleep beside Sandra's bed. Her hand was still in his, light and cold but steady. He rubbed his eyes and looked at her face, peaceful yet fragile. For a few seconds, he allowed himself to believe everything would be fine. But peace never lasted long inside hospital walls. A soft knock broke the silence. It was the doctor. His face was calm, but his eyes carried a weight that made Keanu's chest tighten. He asked Keanu to step outside. Reluctantly, Keanu let go of Sandra's hand and followed him down the corridor. The hallway felt longer than usual, the white light too bright. They entered a small consultation room. The doctor closed the door behind them and sat down, holding a file that looked heavier than paper should be. Keanu waited quietly, his hands folded together. He could hear the faint sound of machines from other rooms, a reminder of how fragile life could be. The doctor took a deep breath and said softly, "There's something we found in Sandra's results, something she already knew about." Keanu's head lifted sharply. "She knew?" The doctor nodded. "It seems she was diagnosed months ago with a chronic autoimmune condition. She chose to manage it privately. We found medication records and notes from her personal physician." Keanu's stomach dropped. "Why didn't she tell anyone?" he asked, almost whispering. The doctor shook his head. "It's not uncommon. Some people, especially those in the public eye, prefer to keep it private. But her recent workload, the stress, and lack of rest made it worse. Her immune system weakened to a point where her body couldn't fight properly. Last night's episode was a warning." Keanu's eyes fell to the floor. His mind began replaying every conversation, every time she brushed off her fatigue with a smile. She had been hiding pain behind her strength, pretending everything was fine while her body quietly struggled. The doctor continued, "We'll start her on a long-term treatment plan. It's manageable, but it requires discipline, medication, rest, emotional stability. She can recover, but she needs to slow down." He paused before adding, "And she'll need support from the people she trusts." Keanu nodded slowly. "She has that," he said softly. When he returned to the room, Sandra was awake. Her eyes were open, soft but filled with confusion. He walked closer and smiled gently, sitting beside her. She tried to speak, but he placed a finger near his lips, telling her to save her strength. After a few minutes, she whispered, "How bad is it?" Keanu hesitated. "The doctor said you need rest and you'll be fine," he said carefully. She looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "They told you more, didn't they?" she said in a faint voice. He tried to avoid it, but she kept looking. Her gaze was calm but knowing. She had always been able to read him, even his silences. Finally, he said, "They told me about your condition." She closed her eyes for a moment, as if bracing herself. Then she turned her head away, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "I didn't want anyone to know," she whispered. "I didn't want pity. I didn't want people to look at me like I was broken." Keanu leaned closer. "You're not broken," he said firmly. "You're one of the strongest people I know." She shook her head slowly. "Strength doesn't mean much when your body stops listening. I kept thinking I could outrun it, work harder, smile more, ignore the pain. I thought if I kept moving, it would forget me." Her voice cracked at the end, and Keanu reached for her hand again. "You don't have to outrun anything," he said. "You just have to heal, and I'll help you. I'll be here." Her eyes met his, searching for truth. "You've got your own world, Keanu. Your own battles," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Some battles are worth fighting only if you're in them." She looked at him quietly, her lips trembling into a weak smile. "You always say things like that," she whispered. "And you make it sound so simple." "Maybe because the truth is simple," he said. "We just make it complicated." For a moment, they both stayed silent, watching the sunlight crawl across the wall. She closed her eyes again, exhausted. Keanu stayed by her side, his mind filled with memories, laughter on movie sets, shared coffee during long nights, quiet conversations under stage lights. He realized that somewhere along the years, what he felt for her had grown into something deeper than friendship. But now wasn't the time to say it. Now was the time to protect her from the very world that adored her. Later that day, The doctor returned with a chart. He said she could be moved to a quieter recovery room soon, but they'd need to monitor her closely for the next few days. Sandra nodded weakly, thanking him. Keanu noticed how she tried to keep her dignity even in pain. She smiled to the nurses, joked lightly about hospital food, and apologized for causing trouble. It broke his heart to see her still caring about others when she could barely lift her hand. In the evening, when most visitors had left, Keanu stayed behind. He walked to the hospital's small garden where faint lamps lit the path. He sat on a bench staring at the still fountain. The air smelled of rain, and a cool breeze passed through the trees. He pulled the small notebook from his pocket, the one Emma had given him, and flipped to the page he had read earlier. This time, another line caught his eye. It said, "Sometimes we hide pain not because we are afraid, but because we don't want love to see us weak." Those words struck deep. He realized Sandra hadn't kept her illness secret out of pride, but out of kindness. She didn't want those who loved her to carry her pain. She had always given more than she received. As he sat there in the quiet night, Keanu made a silent promise to himself. He would not let her fight alone again. He would be there. Not as an actor standing beside another actor, but as a man who cared enough to stay even when things grew difficult. He returned to her room late that night. Sandra was asleep, her breathing calm. He pulled the chair closer and sat down again. He whispered softly, "You don't have to hide anymore." He didn't know that Sandra had heard him, faintly, through the haze of sleep. A tear slipped down her cheek and her hand moved ever so slightly toward his. Outside, the night deepened. The rain began to fall against the window. Somewhere in the building, a nurse changed shifts, and a new doctor reviewed her charts. One small note on the file mentioned an additional complication they hadn't told her yet, something that could make her treatment harder than expected. The next morning, when Sandra finally asked to know every truth, what she would hear would break something inside her, and Keanu would be forced to make a promise that would change both of their lives forever. The truth. She wasn't ready to the next morning arrived with a kind of quiet that felt unnatural. Sunlight filtered softly through the blinds, casting gentle lines across the hospital room. Sandra was awake before anyone entered. She had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of the machines that kept her company. Every beep reminded her that she was still here, still breathing, still fighting. Yet she felt a strange fear pressing at the edges of her mind, a fear that something else was being kept from her. When Keanu entered the room with a cup of coffee in his hand, she smiled faintly. "You didn't go home again, did you?" she asked, her voice low and tired. He smiled softly. "Home's wherever you're okay," he said. She shook her head with a weak chuckle. "That's not healthy, Keanu." He shrugged gently. "Neither is worrying alone." Their eyes met for a brief second, and in that quiet space, no more words were needed. He set the coffee down on the small table and sat beside her, his expression calm but unreadable. She studied him closely. He was trying to stay composed, but there was something in his eyes, a weight he couldn't hide. "They told you something else, didn't they?" she asked suddenly. He looked away, his jaw tightening slightly. "Why would you think that?" "Because you're avoiding my eyes," she said softly. "You do that when something hurts." Keanu took a deep breath, leaning back in the chair. He stared at the floor for a moment before answering. "The doctors wanted to wait until you were stronger before they told you everything." Her heart skipped. "So it's worse," she whispered. He didn't reply. His silence said enough. Just then, the doctor entered, holding her file. Sandra straightened slightly, trying to steady herself. She was tired of half-truths. "Please," she said. No more gentle words. "Just tell me." The doctor hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Your autoimmune condition has affected your heart more than we expected. It's not irreversible, but it complicates recovery. Your body's been under stress for too long, and that's made your system weaker than we thought." Sandra's breath caught. "So what does that mean?" "It means we'll need to adjust your treatment," the doctor said gently. "You'll have to rest for several months. There's a chance of full recovery, but only if you commit to slowing down completely. No work, no long trips, no emotional strain. Your heart needs calm." She stared at him for a long time, her lips trembling slightly. The idea of stopping everything, her work, her projects, her life, felt impossible. She had always moved forward, always kept going no matter how hard it got. Stillness frightened her more than pain. Keanu watched her quietly, his hands clasped together. He could see the battle behind her eyes, pride against fear, strength against surrender. "And if I don't stop?" she asked, her voice thin. The doctor hesitated again, then said, "Then it could become life-threatening." Silence filled the room like a heavy fog. After the doctor left, Sandra turned her face toward the window. For a long moment, she said nothing. Keanu didn't speak either. He knew that sometimes silence was the only language grief could understand. Finally, she whispered, "I hate this." He nodded quietly. "I know. I hate feeling weak," she continued. "I hate needing help. I've spent my whole life trying to be strong, trying to be the one people can depend on." Keanu leaned forward. "You're still that person. Strength doesn't vanish because your body is tired. Strength is what's keeping you here right now." She turned toward him, her eyes glistening. "You make everything sound so simple." "Because the truth is simple," he said softly. "You need to live. That's it. Everything else can wait." She tried to smile, but her lips quivered. "I don't even remember the last time I stopped for myself," she whispered. "I think I forgot how to rest." "Then I'll remind you," he said gently. "Every day if I have to." She looked at him, her eyes softening. "You really would, wouldn't you?" He smiled faintly. "You already know the answer." For the rest of the day, he stayed beside her. They talked about small things, movies, travel, the way time passes differently when you're forced to slow down. She laughed once or twice, the sound faint but real. Every time she smiled, Keanu felt something ease inside him. That evening, Sandra's sister arrived. She was emotional, trying to stay composed but failing. She hugged Sandra gently, whispering how scared she had been. Keanu stepped out to give them privacy, standing by the window in the hallway. Outside, the city lights blinked softly against the dusk. He thought about how strange it was that the world kept moving even when someone's life stood still. After a while, he heard soft voices from inside. Sandra's sister was crying quietly, saying she couldn't stay long but would return the next day. When she left, Keanu went back in. Sandra was looking at the ceiling again, her expression distant. "You heard all that?" he asked. She nodded. "She means well, but she doesn't really understand." "No one does. Everyone thinks I'm just tired. They don't see how it feels inside, like a battle you can't explain." Keanu sat down beside her. "You don't have to explain it," he said softly. "You just have to let someone fight it with you." She turned to look at him, her eyes filling slowly. "You keep saying that, but what if I can't be the same after this?" He shook his head. "You don't have to be the same. Maybe this is life's way of asking you to be real. Not perfect, not unbreakable, just real." Her eyes stayed on him, searching his face for something she hadn't allowed herself to believe. There was a stillness in her gaze, a mix of love, fear, and something like surrender. "You always show up when everything falls apart," she whispered. "Why?" he smiled gently. "Because you always stood beside me when everything was fine. I guess now it's my turn." She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. He reached out and wiped it softly with his thumb. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. She squeezed his hand lightly, whispering, "Thank you." He stayed there until she drifted off to sleep. When the nurse came to check on her, Keanu stepped into the hallway again. He leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The doctor walked by, stopping briefly. "She's lucky to have you," he said. "People fight better when they have someone who refuses to leave." Keanu smiled faintly, but didn't answer. Later, as the night deepened, Sandra woke up alone for a moment. Her chest ached slightly and she pressed her hand against it. Outside her door, she could see the faint shadow of Keanu sitting again. Quiet, steady, watching over her. She whispered softly into the dim light, "Please don't go anywhere." And though she thought he couldn't hear, his head lifted slightly. "I'm not," he said, but as peaceful as the moment seemed. The next day would bring something neither of them expected, a new test result. one that would change the direction of her treatment and reveal a choice Keanu never thought he'd have to make. The promise beneath the silence, the next morning, began with a stillness that felt heavy, almost warning. Sandra had finally slept through the night, her body slowly adjusting to the medication. Keanu was sitting in the same chair, a quiet sentinel beside her. Sunlight spilled gently through the blinds, painting stripes across the floor. For a moment, everything seemed calm, peaceful even, until the doctor walked in, holding a new file that looked different from the others. Keanu noticed the expression immediately. The doctor's face carried the kind of seriousness that had no room for false comfort. He looked at Sandra, then at Keanu, and asked softly, "Can we talk in private for a moment?" Sandra looked uneasy. "Whatever you need to say it here," she said. Her voice was weak but steady. The doctor hesitated but nodded. He placed the file on the side table, opened it, and adjusted his glasses. "We received the full results from your cardiac scans," he began carefully. "There's something new, a small area of inflammation near one of your heart valves. It's not critical right now, but it's a sign that your condition is more advanced than we thought." Keanu's chest tightened. Sandra blinked slowly, her expression unreadable. "So, what does that mean?" she asked. "It means we have two options," the doctor said. "We can start a stronger treatment plan, which could help stabilize the condition. But it comes with risks, fatigue, nausea, possible immune suppression, or we can manage it slowly with mild medication, focusing on comfort and stability. But that means the disease may progress quietly over time." Sandra's lips parted slightly. "So, either I fight it hard and risk breaking down, or I take it easy and risk losing time," she whispered. The doctor nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid that's the balance we have to manage." Keanu's hand moved instinctively toward hers, gripping it gently. He could feel her pulse faint beneath her skin, fragile yet alive. The doctor continued, "We don't need to decide right now. Think about it. Talk it over. Whatever choice you make, we'll support it." After he left, silence filled the room, long, heavy, almost suffocating. Sandra stared at the window again, watching the world outside move freely while she felt trapped inside a body that refused to cooperate. Keanu sat beside her, quiet, waiting for her to speak first. Finally, she turned to him. "You heard everything," she said softly. He nodded. "Yes. What would you do if you were me?" she asked. Keanu thought for a long moment before answering. "I'd fight," he said quietly. "But only if I had someone beside me who made the fight worth it." She looked down at her hands. "And if you didn't?" "Then I'd still fight," he said. "Because giving up never suited you." She smiled faintly, but there was sadness behind it. "You make it sound so noble," she said. "But you don't understand how tired I am. I'm tired in ways that sleep doesn't fix." He leaned closer. "Then let me be your rest," he said. "You've carried everyone for so long. Let someone carry you now." Her eyes filled with tears, but she turned away, shaking her head slowly. "You don't owe me that, Keanu." "Maybe not," he said softly. "But maybe it's not about owing. Maybe it's about choosing." She went quiet again. He could see the storm inside her, the part of her that wanted to fight against the part that wanted peace. Later that day, when the nurse came to check her vitals, Sandra pretended to be asleep. Keanu stepped out for a moment, needing air. He walked down the corridor, his mind heavy with thoughts. Near the hospital garden, he stopped and sat on the same bench he had been to the previous night. Rain had fallen earlier, and the air was fresh, carrying the faint scent of wet soil. He stared at the ground, whispering to himself, "Why her? She spent her life giving." He didn't expect anyone to answer, but an elderly man sitting on a nearby bench spoke softly, "Because the kind ones always teach us what strength really means." Keanu looked up. The man smiled faintly before walking away, leaving those words behind like a small echo. Keanu stayed there for a while, watching the leaves sway in the soft breeze. Then he stood and returned to her room. When he entered, Sandra was sitting up slightly, looking through her phone. She smiled when she saw him. "They told me you disappeared," she said quietly. "Just needed some air," he replied. Did the air tell you anything useful? She asked with a faint smile. Maybe, he said. It told me that we still have time, but we have to use it right. She tilted her head. And what's the right way? By not wasting it on fear, he said. She looked at him for a long time, her eyes soft, but searching. You really believe that? With everything I have, he said. There was a small pause. Then she whispered, If I choose the strong treatment, it'll take months. I'll have to leave everything behind, my work, my world. I'll disappear from the spotlight completely, he nodded. Then disappear. Let the world wait for once. Her lips trembled slightly. I'm afraid of being forgotten, she admitted. He smiled gently. The world might forget, but I won't. Her eyes glistened. You say that now, she whispered. But what happens when this gets harder? When I'm not the person you remember? Keanu took her hand again, his grip steady. Then I'll love the person you become. She broke into quiet tears. He didn't say anything else. He just held her hand until her breathing steadied again. That night, she made her decision. When the doctor came in for rounds, she looked at him with calm determination. I'll take the stronger treatment, she said. If there's a chance, I'll fight for it. The doctor nodded, respect shining in his eyes. That's the spirit, he said softly. After he left, Keanu smiled at her. You did it, she nodded. No, she whispered. We did. The next few days were harder. The treatment started and the side effects arrived quickly. Fatigue, nausea, dizziness. Sometimes she couldn't keep her eyes open for more than a few minutes. But Keanu stayed. Every time she woke up, he was there, reading quietly, holding her hand, talking softly about anything that might make her forget the pain. One evening, as rain tapped softly on the window, she whispered, You've changed, he smiled faintly. How so? You used to run from things that hurt, she said. Now you stay. He looked at her, his eyes warm but sad. Maybe I finally learned that some pain is worth staying for. She closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek. Then promise me one thing, she whispered. Anything, he said. If one day this doesn't go the way we hope, promise you'll still remember me for who I was, not what I became. He leaned closer, his voice steady. No, he said softly. I'll remember you for who you are, right now. Strong, stubborn, and alive. She smiled weakly. You always twist words until they sound beautiful, she said. Only because you deserve beautiful things, he replied. She laughed softly, the sound fragile but real. But behind the warmth of that moment, the doctor was reviewing her latest test results in another room. A shadow crossed his expression. Something in the numbers didn't look right. The treatment was helping in some areas, but causing unexpected stress in others. He made a note to speak with them the next morning, and as the night deepened, Keanu sat by her side once more, unaware that the hardest choice of his life was waiting just hours away. A choice between hope and heartbreak, between staying and letting go. The promise that never broke. The sun had barely risen when the doctor knocked on the door. The sound was soft but sharp enough to stir Keanu from his light sleep. He had spent the night in the same chair again, his hand resting near Sandra's. She was still asleep, her breathing calm but fragile, her face pale against the white pillow. The doctor stepped in quietly, his expression serious but gentle. Keanu noticed it instantly. That look of quiet urgency people in hospitals wear when the news they bring can't be softened. Can we talk outside for a moment? The doctor whispered. Keanu nodded slowly and followed him into the corridor. The morning light filtered through the windows, making the hallway feel both alive and unbearably still. The doctor opened the file in his hands. The new test results came in early this morning, he began carefully. The treatment is helping in some areas, her immune response has improved, but there's also inflammation in her heart muscle. It's a dangerous reaction. If we continue the same medication, it might do more harm than good. Keanu felt the world tilt slightly. So what do we do? He asked quietly. We can stop the medication to protect her heart, the doctor said. But if we do that, the disease could progress faster. Either way, it's a risk. Keanu's voice broke slightly. So you're asking me to choose between hurting her body and hurting her chances? The doctor sighed. Yes, he said softly. And I'm sorry. But it's a decision she has to make. With you. Keanu stared at the file for a long time before speaking. Let me talk to her first. He walked back into the room slowly. Sandra was awake now, looking out the window. The morning light painted her face in gold, making her look fragile but radiant. When she saw him, she smiled faintly. You look tired, she said. He smiled back, but it didn't reach his eyes. I've been worse, he said softly. She studied him for a second. What happened? She asked quietly. I can tell from your face. He sat down beside her, taking her hand. The treatment's working, he said carefully, but it's also hurting your heart. The doctor thinks we need to make a choice. She looked down, her thumb brushing over his fingers. If we stop it, what happens? He swallowed hard. It might come back faster. You could get weaker, and if we keep going, your heart might not handle it. She nodded slowly, her eyes distant. So either way, I lose something. Keanu didn't speak. He could feel her slipping into quiet thought, her gaze lost somewhere between fear and acceptance. After a long pause, she whispered, You know what's strange? When you've lived long enough pretending to be strong, you forget how to be scared out loud. He squeezed her hand gently. Then be scared quietly, he said. I'll hear it. She smiled through tears. You always say things like that. Because they're true, he said softly. For a while, they sat in silence. The hum of machines filled the background. Nurses passed outside, voices low and careful. Finally, Sandra took a deep breath. I don't want more pain, she said slowly. Not for me, not for anyone watching me go through it. If my body's tired, maybe it's telling me to stop fighting the wrong way. He looked at her, trying to stay calm. Are you sure? She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Yes, I want peace, Keanu. Not surrender, just peace. His throat tightened. If that's what you want, I'll make sure you have it, he said. She looked at him, her eyes soft but shining with something pure. Thank you, she whispered. Later that afternoon, the doctor came back with the revised plan, milder medication, less pressure on her heart. It wouldn't cure her, but it would give her time. How much, no one could say. When everyone left the room, Keanu sat beside her again. The window was open slightly, and the wind carried the faint scent of rain. She looked at him and said softly, I used to think love was about saving someone. Now I think it's about sitting with them when they can't be saved. He leaned forward, tears in his eyes. You're not gone, he whispered. Don't talk like that, she smiled faintly. I'm not saying goodbye. I'm saying thank you. He shook his head. Don't thank me. I need you to get better. I need you here. Her voice trembled slightly. You will still have me, just not in the way you're used to. You'll see me in quiet mornings, in kindness, in calm. I'll be around you in ways that don't need words. He covered his face with his hands, his breath shaky. I can't lose you, he whispered. She touched his hand gently. You won't, she said, because you've already found me, really found me, and that never fades. For a while, he couldn't speak. He just sat there holding her hand as if it could keep her anchored to the world. She rested her head slightly to the side, her eyes closing in peace. Days passed. The new medication helped her rest more comfortably. Her energy returned in small waves, enough to smile, enough to talk, enough to remember the world beyond the hospital walls. She and Keanu spent hours talking quietly, about old memories and moments that once seemed ordinary but now felt sacred. One afternoon, as the sky outside turned gold, Sandra asked him softly, Do you believe people meet for a reason? He smiled faintly. I do now. Then promise me something, she whispered. Anything. No matter what happens, live quietly. Live kindly. Don't let grief turn you into silence. He nodded, his eyes shining. I promise, she smiled, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for his. That's all I need. Over the next few weeks, she grew weaker. The doctors called it a gentle decline. Keanu never left her side. He read to her, sang softly when the nights were long, and spoke of every small joy he could find. Even when her voice faded, she listened, her eyes full of quiet love. One night near midnight, she woke him with a faint whisper. "Keanu?" He sat up instantly. "I'm here," he said softly. She smiled weakly. "Do you remember that line you told me years ago? The one about time being kind only to those who use it wisely." He nodded. "Yes." She took a slow breath. "We used it well." Her eyes drifted closed again, her hand still in his. Her breathing slowed, calm and gentle, like a song fading into the night. Keanu sat there, motionless, holding her hand until the morning light appeared. The doctor entered quietly at dawn, and the look on his face said everything. Keanu didn't move. He just kissed her forehead gently, whispering, "You kept your promise. Now I'll keep mine." Weeks later, at a small private memorial, Keanu stood quietly among a few close friends and family. There were no speeches, no cameras, no noise, just stillness, and the soft rustle of wind through trees. Someone placed a single white flower on a wooden table beside her photograph. Keanu stepped forward, placed her notebook beside it, and whispered, "You were right. The strongest people really do hide their pain behind kind eyes." Months passed. Life resumed its rhythm, but something inside him had changed. He spent his days quietly helping at a local shelter, mentoring young artists, giving his time where it mattered. He never spoke much about those days in the hospital, but sometimes when the evening light fell across his face, he would smile softly, as if hearing her voice again. And though the world moved on, Keanu carried her presence in every small act of kindness, in every moment of peace, in every silent promise kept, because love, the kind that survives time, pain and loss, doesn't end when someone leaves. It simply changes shape and keeps walking beside you, quietly, forever.